The knock wasn't polite. It was the kind of pounding that rattles the doorframe and makes the pictures on your wall tremble. I froze mid-step in the hallway, my instincts firing before my brain could catch up. 3 silhouettes stood on the other side of the frosted glass, broad shoulders, dark clothes, the faint metallic glint of something pinned to their chests. It was nearly midnight. No neighbor drops by at that hour unless something's on fire, but this wasn't a neighborly visit. My son stirred from his room upstairs, footsteps heavy with concern. Before he could ask what was happening, I held up a hand. "Stay back," I whispered, moving closer to the door. I didn't turn on the porch light, didn't want to give them the advantage. "Open up," a man barked. "This is official HOA business." Those words sent a chill through me, not fear, but recognition. The HOA had been circling us for weeks, sending notices about the flagpole in my yard, the color of my mailbox, even the length of my grass. My refusal to bend had made me a target, but midnight intimidation? That was a new level. I took a slow breath. Ex-military habits die hard. The pounding stopped, replaced by muffled voices. One of them muttered, "He's ignoring us. Maybe we should escalate." That word, escalate, told me everything. These weren't board members. These were thugs, wearing shiny pieces of tin to play cop. And if they were bold enough to come at night, they were bold enough to push further. Behind me, I heard the creak of the stairs. My son ignored my warning and came closer, phone in hand, ready to dial. But instead of calling, he looked at me with calm defiance. "Dad," he said, "I think it's better if James answers the door." For a split second, I didn't understand. Then I saw the movement in the shadows of the living room. A man rose silently from the couch, tall, built like stone, eyes sharp and steady. My son's personal bodyguard. He'd been staying with us while recovering from a protective detail overseas. The pounding resumed, louder, more aggressive. The doorknob rattled. And James stepped forward, rolling his shoulders, voice low and steady. "I'll handle this." The handle turned once more. Headlights cut across the windows, another vehicle pulling up outside. The night was about to change. The headlights outside didn't move. They just sat there, idling, engine growling like a predator waiting for its cue. James stood inches from the door, posture loose but coiled, like a spring ready to strike. I'd seen men like him in combat zones. They didn't bluff, and they didn't rattle. "Step away from the door," one of the men barked, his voice rising with false authority. "You're in violation of HOA regulations, and we have the right to inspect the premises." James leaned close to the door, his tone calm enough to make my skin prickle. "You have no right to anything here. This is private property. Back away before you regret it." There was a pause, then laughter. Ugly, mocking laughter. The kind men use when they want to sound brave, but their nerves are fraying. I pulled my son aside, lowering my voice. "Go upstairs. Lock your door. If anything happens, you know what to do." He didn't argue. He knew better. He glanced once at James, then disappeared up the staircase. Outside, the men weren't leaving. A second knock, slower this time, deliberate, echoed through the house. Then came the sound of paper sliding under the door. James didn't even look at it. I bent down and picked it up. A notice of immediate HOA compliance, stamped with a fake-looking seal. Threats of liens, threats of forced property seizure, threats of removal. It was written like some cartel ultimatum, not a neighborhood regulation. James smirked, eyes narrowing. Amateurs? But I wasn't smiling, because it wasn't just paper. They were testing us. Testing how far they could push before we broke. By morning, the whispers had already spread across the cul-de-sac. A few neighbors avoided eye contact, scurrying back into their homes. But others lingered. One man whispered, "They came to my door last week. Said they'd find me if I didn't cut down my tree." Another shook her head. "I heard they're hiring security. Men who aren't real police." The neighborhood was splitting in two. Those who bowed to the intimidation, and those quietly praying someone would stand up. What would you do if your HOA tried this? I'd ask any listener. Because the reality was brutal. Fight back or be crushed. That evening, an SUV rolled slowly past my house, windows tinted. A camera flash went off, then another. James was already at the window, eyes hard. "They're escalating," he muttered. And as if on cue, 2 men in black jackets walked up my driveway, clipboards in hand, fake badges catching the porch light. This wasn't harassment anymore. It was reconnaissance. The clipboards were a prop. I knew it, and James knew it. Real inspectors don't come in pairs after dark, and they don't move like these men did. Crisp steps, scanning windows, one hand never far from their jacket pockets. I cracked the blinds with 2 fingers, keeping my silhouette low. One of them tilted his head toward the house, then whispered something I couldn't hear. The other reached out, testing the latch on my front gate. That sound, the faint click of metal against metal, sent a current through me. They weren't here to write citations. They were probing, seeing if they could breach without resistance. James motioned silently. "Stay back." He slid into position near the entryway, shoulders squared, eyes locked. I'd seen combat soldiers before, but there was something about his calm that unsettled me. This wasn't his first midnight confrontation. Then came the crunch, boots stepping onto my side yard. Revel. They weren't sticking to the driveway anymore, they were circling. I moved quietly to the back door, listening. Sure enough, one was testing the fence. Wood creaked, hinges strained. A neighbor's porch light flicked on, then just as quickly flicked off. Curtains twitched. No one wanted to get involved. My pulse steadied. I wasn't panicking. Years of training don't let you. But my mind was cataloging every detail. The rhythm of their steps, the deliberate way they checked windows, the metallic ping of something hitting my gutter. They were marking the house. Impersonating officers, James muttered under his breath. That's 5-year minimum if caught. He wasn't worried about the law, though. He was worried about the moment before it arrived. The men regrouped at the front porch. One produced a crowbar from under his jacket. He tapped it lightly against the railing, a signal. The other man adjusted his fake badge, squared his shoulders, and raised his voice. "Final warning. Step outside now, or we'll enter by force under HOA authority." The audacity almost made me laugh, but there was no humor in James's expression. He moved into position, standing directly in line with the door, body angled like a wall. I caught his eye. "If they come through, no second chances." "Understood," he replied. The crowbar wedged into the doorframe. Wood groaned. Splinters snapped. I clenched my fists, every muscle wired. This wasn't a standoff anymore. It was a break-in. The next second would decide everything. The doorframe screamed as the crowbar bit deeper. Splinters flew. James didn't flinch. He planted his feet, muscles coiled like steel cables, eyes locked on the shadows moving behind the glass. The lock gave way with a crack. The door burst inward. 2 men surged through, faces hard with fake authority, badges flashing under the hallway light. "Step aside," one barked. "HOA inspection." He never finished. James moved faster than I could track. His left hand seized the crowbar, twisting it free with a sharp wrench that sent the man stumbling. His right shoulder drove into the intruder's chest, pinning him against the wall so hard the drywall cracked. The second thug froze mid-step, suddenly realizing he hadn't walked into a compliant homeowner. He'd walked into a fortress guarded by a professional. "Drop it," James commanded, voice low, controlled, lethal. The man fumbled for his jacket pocket. Wrong move. James's boot lashed out, kicking the clipboard from his hands, sending it skittering across the tile. Papers flew everywhere, stamped with counterfeit seals. "You think this is authority?" James barked, slamming the crowbar to the floor. "This is breaking and entering." The first man gasped for air, still pinned to the wall, face twisted with panic. The second backed toward the door, but I stepped forward, blocking his exit. "You're not going anywhere." Outside, tires crunched. More headlights. Another SUV pulling up, doors opening fast. Shadows spilled across my lawn. More men, heavier, louder. They were expecting an easy intimidation. Instead, they were about to meet resistance. James glanced at me once, just a flicker of communication. I nodded. We were on the same page. The thugs outside shouted, "House is secure!" James answered for them, his voice a growl that carried through the night. "House is secured. You picked the wrong one." The silence that followed was electric. Then boots thundered up the porch steps. More men pressed toward the entry, hands on their belts, eyes scanning for weakness. James released the first intruder, letting him crumple to the floor, gasping. He squared up at the doorway, body like a wall of stone. "They thought they could break me," James said, calm as a storm's eye. "But they didn't know who they dealing with." The front door swung wide, and the next wave of imposters stormed in, only to find themselves stepping straight into a trap. The imposters charged in, 4 of them, broad-shouldered, all carrying themselves like enforcers, not neighbors. Their fake badges glinted under the hallway light, but their eyes gave them away. Predators expecting sheep. James didn't move back an inch. He shifted just enough to control the space, voice cutting through the chaos. "On the ground! Now!" They laughed. One stepped forward, hand sliding toward his waistband. James struck first, a lightning-fast disarm, wrist twisted, body driven to the floor in a controlled arc that ended with the man groaning in pain. The others hesitated, suddenly unsure. That hesitation was their mistake. I stepped in, holding the crowbar they'd left behind. "Not so tough when the HOA mask comes off, are you?" 2 more rushed at James, and the house became a storm of motion. Fists, grunts, boots on hardwood. It wasn't wild, it was precise. Every move James made was tactical, deliberate. Within moments, 3 of the 4 were down, pinned, gasping. The last one backed away, palms raised. "You don't understand," he stammered. "We were told to—" "Save it," James cut him off. "You'll be explaining it to real law enforcement." And as if summoned by those words, sirens wailed in the distance. Red and blue lights bled across the walls, growing brighter by the second. The imposters froze, eyes wide. Their fake authority evaporated in the face of the real thing. 2 squad cars screeched to a halt outside. Doors flew open. Uniformed officers stormed the porch, weapons drawn. "Sheriff's Department, hands where we can see them!" The imposters dropped immediately, sprawling face down on my living room floor. It was over in minutes. Handcuffs clicked shut. Fake badges, clipboards, and counterfeit notices were bagged as evidence. The real officers exchanged grim looks. One muttered, "We've been tracking reports of this HOA crew for months. Intimidation, fraud, impersonation. You just handed us the proof we needed." Neighbors peeked from behind curtains as the imposters were led away in chains. Some faces showed relief, others shame for having stayed silent, but no one could deny the truth anymore. The reign of fear was finished. James finally relaxed, rolling his shoulders, breathing steady. My son came down the stairs, wide-eyed but safe. I pulled him close, feeling the weight lift off my chest. Weeks later, the HOA sign at the neighborhood entrance came down. Fraud charges had dismantled the board, and new leadership was voted in. Peep. Elihudu actually cared about the community, not control. We rebuilt slowly, but with freedom in the air. And as the sun set over the cul-de-sac, I stood on my porch in silence. Not the silence of fear, not the silence of intimidation. The kind of silence you earn after a battle won,